Maelstrom is also available as a BBC paperback.
Tomorrow, exclusive coverage of World Cup football, England versus Northern Ireland. Live from Belfast, World Cup special tomorrow at 7:25.
And now here's another good sport, Barry Took, with your points of view.
Good evening. The British have one wonderful quality. Whenever anything is attacked, they rush to its defence. First the Falklands, then Animal Lib, and now blot on the landscape. Here's Cherry Bryn of Sheffield.
I'm beginning to think I'm the only person in the whole country who's harbouring this dreadful secret. You see, I hate Dallas and Dynasty and all soap operas, and I think Blot on the Landscape is very funny. There, it's out. And I don't care if I'm stoned in the streets and never again mentioned in polite company.
Well, I think you'll find that polite company is also watching Blot on the Landscape. We've had a number of letters praising it, including this one from Mrs. S.J. Lyons of Stratford-upon-Avon.
While I'm inclined to agree that George Cole's Bottom is a sight I would rather have missed, nevertheless the series is very much after the spirit of the book, and the cast achieve exactly the right degree of overacting, which renders the whole thing totally inoffensive and absolutely hilarious.
Thus the north of England and the Midlands, but what of the southwest? Well, here's John Farmer of Kingswear, Dartmouth.
Dear Barry, Blot on the Landscape. Wonderful stuff. I've never laughed so much for ages. Particularly the scene with George Cole trussed up like a spring chicken. So that's what our MPs get up to.
Yes, makes you think, doesn't it? You know, it's been interesting to note the first reactions to the BBC's new twice-weekly serial, The EastEnders. Here's what some of you think of it. First, Stuart King of Wadebridge, Cornwall.
After what seems like months of BBC build-up, the EastEnders arrived on our screens with nothing more than a trashy, over-violent storyline and weak cardboard performances from its second-rate cast. Unfortunately, this will almost certainly be sufficient to ensure its success. I, for one, would like to see this nauseating insult to the intelligence nipped in the bud. Surely we deserve something a little better for our licence fee.
But on the other hand, there's Tim Brazier of Welling in Kent.
EastEnders, excellent. I must write and say how impressed I was with the first episode of EastEnders. Its appeal was immediate because it was clearly rooted in reality.
But, says Catherine Bright of Chesham,
Is it really necessary to portray EastEnders as argumentative, aggressive and totally unlikable characters? What an insult to the real EastEnders.
and last word, for now, goes to...
A towel in Pauline Fowler's laundrette, Albert Square, East 20.
Well, actually, it's from Bideford.
EastEnders, fantastic, brilliant. Superb acting, superb direction, superb storyline, great characters. After this brilliant opening episode, I think EastEnders is here to stay for a very long time.
And I suspect you're right. The vote seems pretty divided, as it does about Maelstrom, which precedes us. Here are two letters on that subject. The first is from Reg Bream of Great Bar, Birmingham.
I'm beginning to wonder if anything will ever happen in Maelstrom. It is, I grant you, all very well to gaze at pretty scenery, quaint wooden houses and the immobile physiognomy of innumerable plastic dolls, but I do like to see a bit of action now and again.
And Reg Bream concludes his letter.
If things don't warm up by episode 6, I'm going to stop watching it.
A touch of tongue-in-cheek. You see, there are only 6 episodes. There's a touch of tongue-in-cheek in this letter from Mrs. N.J. Cupper of Yeovil too.
I would like to say how absolutely wonderful BBC's new series Maelstrom is. Here I am trying to stop biting nails when Catherine Durrell goes into the house on the island all by herself. I'm sorry, Nails, but you don't stand a chance against that.
No comment. There's been a lot of new things happening on the BBC lately. Even the logo and the weather are different. Peter Smith of Warwick comments,
I'm writing to say how much I like the new BBC Globe. The gold colour adds a great touch.
Peter Smith goes on,
The main subject of this letter is the new and wonderful BBC Weather Service. The presentation especially is excellent.
but...
One problem, the clouds. I can't see where they end, or where they start for that matter. Maybe some sharper graphics, please?
And here's Catherine Haskell of Blaydon, Oxford.
I am a great fan of the old weather symbols, and when I heard that they were stopping using them, I thought, Barry Took.
You thought... Well, I've seen myself as a sex symbol, but never as a weather symbol.
I was wondering
Yes?
if you could send me a cloud or two, if it's possible.
Well, I'm afraid it isn't possible. The weather chaps have had a number of requests for clouds and so on, but they can't give them away, so please don't write and ask. Like they say about cashing cheques in pubs, don't ask, a refusal may cause offence. But here's John Jones of Bournemouth being silly.
Near the end of A Change in the Weather, BBC 2, February the 18th, I distinctly heard Bill Giles say that the weathermen were always looking at nudist plays. One person's warm front can be the cause of another person's ridge of high pressure.
New displays? New displays! Good enough a blot on the landscape. But here now are your thoughts on the new improved Wogan to be taken 3 times weekly. Linda Tierney of Worthing leads the way.
Old Wogan has done it again, hasn't he? You just can't keep a good leprechaun down, can you? Never could stand the man on the radio, don't know why, but on the box he's magic.
And Rudy Otter of Greenford asks,
Why is BBC1 putting Terry Wogan on only 3 times a week?
and suggests a new schedule.
7 a.m, wake up with Wogan. 8 a.m, breakfast with Wogan. 9 a.m, go to work with Wogan. 12 p.m, lunchtime with Wogan. 3 p.m, afternoon with Wogan. 5 p.m, good evening Wogan. 7 p.m, relax with Wogan. 8 p.m, the wonderful world of Wogan. 9 p.m, the news with Wogan. 10 p.m, wind down with Wogan. 11 p.m, good night with Wogan.
And Rudy Otter adds a seriously though.
Seriously, though, haven't we already had more than enough of his boring brand of bonhomie and buffoonery to last a lifetime? What do other viewers think?
Well, doubtless you'll tell us. This is what Miss Susan Bunker of Stepney, and I suspect many others, think.
Thank goodness Terry Wogan is back at last. I was beginning to suffer badly from Wogan withdrawal symptoms.
Now here's T.R. Oliver of Ipswich on the subject of a play I'm sure many enjoyed.
I would like to convey my pleasure having watched The Unknown Soldier on BBC2 on Sunday night. Please pass on my thanks to whom it may concern for an excellent production. There are too few plays, films shown on television which in my humble opinion become standards, that is, remembered and recalled for several years hence, as I feel this one will.
Well, there's no doubt that Steptoe and Son is one of those standards. An episode was repeated last week and reminded us all of the brilliance of Corbett and Bramble, Galton and Simpson, and Duncan Wood, who produced it. We finish this week with another look at Steptoe and Son. Until next week, goodbye.
Now put your arms around me.
I didn't know you cared.
That one there, that one there.
Do you come here often?
Concentrate on what you're doing. Oh, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2. Who's the lucky boy for going your way? To kiss you good night on your doorway. I'm sorry, Dad. What did I do wrong?
You stood on me bleeding foot.
If you have any comments on BBC television programmes, please write to Points of View, BBC Television, London W12 8QT.
On BBC2 shortly, there's some unexpected emotional entanglement in episode 3 of Inside Out. In 25 minutes here on BBC1, Miami Vice begins a 2-part story, The Hit List, and as Crockett's domestic problems come to a head, Tubbs battles to prevent him becoming the victim of a deadly assassin. Film 85 at 10:15 includes a look at a new production starring Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds, and after our regional programmes at 10:45, 11:15 is the time to meet tonight's ballroom champions. Now it's 9 o'clock and time for the news with John Humphreys.
The Americans try to stop the rush to dollars and it helps the pound immediately. The rapist they called the Fox, he gets 6 life sentences. Empty classrooms as thousands of teachers strike for more pay. Britain's newest prison, the critics say it's too comfortable. And England caught out in the World Championships. Good evening. The seemingly unstoppable dollar has had a big setback. It's biggest for months. And it's happened on a day when the pound came within a whisker of reaching parity, $1 for £1. At one stage it was as low as $1 3.5. In London it finally closed above $1.05. In New York tonight it passed $1.07 but steadied at $1.06. That seems to have been partly because Britain's trade figures were the best for a long time, but mainly because the American government is starting to say gloomy things about the dollar. The head of their central bank warned in essence what goes up may come down. A report from our economics correspondent, James Long.
Until late this afternoon, a 1-to-1 parity rate with the dollar looked just round the corner for the pound. Another 36 hours at the rate it's been falling since Friday would have disposed of the final 3.5 cents. The reason? Last week's strangely timed remarks from President Reagan, implying there would be no action on the dollar from America.
I think the problem of the dollar today is that our trading partners in the world have not caught up with us in economic recovery. I think they have a ways to go in changing some rigidities in their customs and their methods of doing business and in industry. And what we really need is their recovery to bring their money up in value comparable to ours.
Those remarks were an open invitation to push the dollar still higher, and they horrified central bankers. Among them, it would seem, America's own central banker, Paul Volcker, seen here meeting Mrs. Thatcher last week. Late this afternoon, he did something to undo the harm. In unexpected testimony to a congressional committee in Washington, he launched a bombshell at a vulnerable moment just as European foreign exchanges were closing. When asked if central bank intervention was a good idea.
I can't say whether there's been any dramatic success from recent actions. I think there's a question of whether actions were taken forcefully enough.
Mr. Volcker seemed to be saying that together the central banks could act to stop the dollar. He also said of the dollar that what rises too far must fall. His words had an immediate and powerful effect, sending the dollar plunging for the first time this year. The pound missed part of that, failing to recover as much as other currencies, because the markets took note of some rather fatalistic words from Mrs. Thatcher in the Commons. Attacked by Mr. Kinnock over the problems of the pound, she said there was little that could be done.
Over the last month, sterling has appreciated against all the major currencies except the yen and the dollar. There are virtually only two things one can do against a surge of currencies, and that is very, very limited indeed.
Those two things were a further rise in interest rates or action by central banks. Well, until this afternoon, the Bank of England had resigned itself to standing aside, unable to prevent the $1 pound, hoping to win back some ground after the markets had got that out of their system. Today's events don't mean that danger's now past, but they do mark the first significant reverse for the dollar in many months.
The rapist who became known and feared as the Fox was sentenced today to 6 terms of life imprisonment. Malcolm Fairley had carried out a series of
that the uprising